Good afternoon and welcome to the Insight Teen Hour. You're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and my name is Frederik. I'm owner of Insight Treatment Programs here in Santa Clarita, a teen program, teenagers struggling with mental health and or drug and alcohol issues. It's an intensive outpatient program here in our community. And today on the show, obviously every Monday between 2 and 3 is the Insight Teen Hour, and we talk about things that's related to teen mental health. This Monday, I felt that we really needed to have a chat about teens that are struggling because they're on the spectrum. Teens that have been, teens that are either high functioning or low functioning. Often at Insight, we have some kids come in who have been diagnosed with autism on the spectrum, and we're certainly not expert in this field. So we tend to rely on people from the outside world who comes in and gives us some guidance on that. And one of those experts is Jose Rios. Rios. Sorry, there we go. Who's here today because he's a board certified behavioral analyst. And he is working with teens and families all the time, where the teens has been diagnosed with autism. So he's sort of an expert in this field, and he is here to help us understand what is ABA, what sort of give parents out there a little bit of guidance on how they can look at things and how they can support their teen. So welcome to the studio.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Frederik, for that introduction. Oh, my expert. I feel my imposter syndrome kicking in a little bit. You know,
that's all good.
No, yeah. So I did want to make a slight correction. It's board certified behavior analyst.
Yes.
Sorry. No, that's neither here nor there. But yeah. So I did. I do want to say first and foremost, thank you so much for opening up this space for me to allow me to disseminate this field, which I truly love, the field of ABA. So thank you for that. So ABA stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. It is often thought to be the golden standard treatment for autism, and so because of that, oftentimes it's thought to be that it treats only autism, and that's not necessarily the case. ABA can be for anyone, right? So anyone that's human, anyone that's behaving, can definitely benefit from ABA, whether it be, any goals related to fitness or any, perhaps you want to increase the time you spend studying. Even sleep has been known to be treated behaviorally as well. So these areas are some areas that ABA addresses. Other areas too are behavioral excesses. So when we hear about behavioral excesses, we see these types of behaviors that happen at high frequency, and these behaviors may be harmful in the long run, such as smoking or drinking. And so ABA can help with those particular high frequency behaviors as well.
And Jose, you typically you have your private practice. Called Laray's Behavioral Solutions.
That is correct.
Right? And you invite people or you invite parents to come in with their teens and you're guiding them through that. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about sort of your background and what brought you into this field and why you have such a passion for helping families with teens or kids and teens struggling with autism or being on the spectrum.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of got into this field by accident, really. So it was a couple of years, I want to say around 7 years back. I ended up graduating from my master's from CSUN, actually. And so the master's that I got was specific for research and preparation for a PhD. As we all know, PhD programs in clinical psychology, mind you, are a little competitive.
Yes, very.
So I didn't get in that time that I applied. And so, I had this degree. I didn't know what to do with it, and I needed money. So I saw this post for a behavioral interventionist, and ever since then, the rest is history. when I met my first client, they were nonverbal. They couldn't speak, and intervention started. We started off with maybe one utterances, then words, then phrases. By the end of that 6-month period, that kid was talking. So that kind of showed me the power of this type of technology, and it's frankly what keeps me here.
Great. And your private practice is where? Maybe you should tell the audience.
My private practice
online right now. I know, right? Or you did?
So right now, we serve mainly in home, and
that's right.
Mainly right now, at least in the beginning, I want to start off slow, so more around the parent consultation component to it. So it's more of like parents coming in, providing me with their concerns, and then addressing those concerns via ABA. Once we expand, we're hoping to do in-home and then in-clinic and hopefully school, so that we can reach out to as many individuals as we can.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a huge need for it, that's for sure.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
And Jose, do you typically focus on, I know you have kids between 2 and 20 basically, right?
Yeah,
it's a big
age range.
Big age range.
Yeah.
Do you have some sort of like where do you typically go? Is it high functioning teens or kids, that you usually help, or is it more low functioning? Is there any sort of guidance you can give on that?
I typically see kids across the functioning spectrum, really.
Okay.
So anywhere from severe challenging behavior, non-vocal kids to the more the more expressive youth. So anywhere in that spectrum, I see those are typically the type of clients I see. So I've seen everything.
Got it. And then Jose, let's get into the weeds of it. So, can you sort of explain to us what is, for those who might not know, what is? We've already talked about ABA, but what is a teen that is on the spectrum or a teen that is autistic? What behaviors do you typically see? What sort of characterizes a teen that's struggling with that?
It really varies, really. Like you just mentioned, it's a spectrum, right? So I can't. On a particular day, I can see a client who is highly vocal, very smart, but on occasion he may have those big outbursts. He may disrupt the classroom, for example, like tables flipped, yelling, screaming, aggression, and then on another day, I may see a kid who's non-vocal, who may need assistance from a communication device that we may use, or we can create a communication modality that works best for them, like sign language or picture exchange. So the interventions really vary on the level and severity of the client, and it's within ABA, our interventions are always highly individualized.
Do you typically start with sort of assessing where the client would be on the spectrum, or is that typically done before they come to you, or how does that work? How's the beginning?
Yeah. So typically during the beginning stages, I do a combination of what is called a skills assessment. So that kind of really tells me where they are in terms of like the skills, and those skills are tested across different areas. So language and communication, independent living skills, any feeding concerns as well. And then I also discuss, or we actually implement something called an FBA. That FBA stands for Functional Behavior Assessment, and that really, if there is behavioral concerns that come with the client, we would do an FBA to kind of get to the roots of what the behavior is actually trying to communicate, right? That's in short what an FBA is. It's just trying to get to the root of things.
How long does that take? Is that something you do, week in and week out for a certain amount of weeks, or is it something that's being done in an hour in one session?
So this is done based on like the insurance mandates as well, and it's also done based on the number of hours we get allotted by the insurance, right? There's also within each family there always comes the question of like who's going to pay for these services, right? So based on that, insurance is allotted with a certain amount of hours. Typically, it's anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. I typically utilize perhaps 2 to 3 appointments where I see the client. And within those 3 appointments, I do the skills assessment and the FBA. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the insurance will pay for that as part of the initial, let's say, 12 hours that they will authorize.
Yes, it's through it's like a pre-authorization process before we actually begin the full ABA program. Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the actual testing, I know that there's a lot of testing sometimes that's being done, like more comprehensive testing. Mm-hmm. Do you also do that, or would you refer out for that, mm-hmm. or and when is that usually done? Is that usually done before the families come to you, like? Families already know, hey, look, we've done comprehensive testing. Mm-hmm. We know that our child is on the spectrum. Here's the report. There you go, Jose. Could you help us with the ABA? Could you help us with some of the behavioral adjustments?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so regarding that, typically when a child comes to us, they do have a diagnosis. Okay. Just because some insurances require that as a prerequisite for them to even get that pre-authorization. And so that addresses that portion. But it's so interesting and it's so funny that you mentioned that testing, right? Because we as behavior analysts typically don't do psychological testing per se. We as behavior analysts are very by observation and kind of like maneuvering the environmental variables to look at the behavior change. But on occasion, because of the insurance mandates, we are thrust into the world of testing because that's what they require as part of their outcomes.
Uh-huh. Yes, mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the diagnosis, what you're saying is, the diagnosis, of course it's relevant, of course it's important, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, the behavior in itself is what you're addressing.
Yes.
And you could argue, well, what exactly the score is on the spectrum and what the diagnosis is could be not as relevant as the actual behavior that you're seeing in the moment and addressing that no matter what.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. That is exactly what I'm saying. And I want to add to that too. A lot of the times in those assessments, they reflect certain the quote unquote deficits that the client may have. Mm-hmm. But we in ABA have this notion of what is socially significant or what is important to the client, right? So some of the deficits presented in those assessments may not be as important to the client, right? The client, for example, 15-year-old client might be really low functioning. Is it important for him to do adding or subtracting, or is it important for them to learn to brush their teeth? Or to shower, or to do those basic independent living skills, right? So yeah, there's this idea that the behaviors that we address need to be important for the client and the family.
Mm-hmm. And how does that actually? I'm just curious. I'm talking a little bit out of the book, mm-hmm. But is that a dialogue with the parents, for instance, if it's a younger child, about hey, where should we put in? What behaviors does the family see or the parents see as issues, and what behaviors do you see as being important to address? Is that sort of consultation process between you and the parents as to what should be focused on in the beginning?
Yes, absolutely. And that's another part of what I like about the ABA process. There are these when we do get the authorization for the full ABA program, we do get allotted hours for parent coaching. Mm-hmm. And part of that parent coaching is, yes, we do go over behavioral strategies and for the parents to implement when we're not there. But within that parent consultation comes those discussions that you're mentioning, right? What is important to you? There are things that are very obvious, right? So like behavioral challenges are are one of those obvious things where, like, yes, we don't want the kid to aggress because that's disruptive, and that may lead to a very dire consequence. So that's not that that's a shoo-in in terms of social significance, but that's social significance, right? But there's also other aspects of social significance, like culture, right? There are, for example, families like here in the Western culture, perhaps it's socially significant to sleep in separate beds. Mm-hmm. In other cultures, that's not the case.
Interesting. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, what is social significant to one family, it may not be socially significant to the other family in that regard.
Mm-hmm. And could you describe to me what is a typical, if you can, what is a typical family? What does it look like when they come to you? Like what challenges are they facing? What do they typically see as the most important things to get addressed? Mm-hmm. How do you could you describe some sort of scenario or some sort of typical family that will come to you?
Yeah, there is no typical family, right? Because it's a spectrum. But if the kid is, so again, it depends on the need of the child, right? But there is some commonalities that I do see within each family, especially concerning some of the challenging behaviors that the kiddos may present. A lot of the times I see that perhaps the family, just because it's convenient, they accommodate to a lot of that problem behavior. And what I mean by that is that sometimes the kid may have an outburst out in public, right? Understandably so, it can be embarrassing, right? And so, instead of parents going through that, they may just end up not going out. So it becomes restrictive in that regard. And so when I see families, there is a level of that restriction that they come with, right? Mm-hmm. And so my goal as a clinician is to help them with strategies, first of all, but also the confidence that for them to know that they can address these issues when they are out and about, and let's say a behavior happens, that they can, address that issue so that they don't have to be avoiding, and it doesn't have to be restrictive, right?
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. I would imagine there would also be, I know we're going to go into a break very soon, but I would imagine, Jose, that there would also be some situations where parents maybe are scared, right, about some of the, either whether it's a very stubborn behavior or whether it's what you say, an outburst of some sort. But they could sort of be a little scared of how to deal with this when they're out and about, right?
Absolutely.
So, but I think we have to go into a little break now. You are listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and this is the Insight Teen Hour. That's every Monday between 2 and 3 p.m. So tune in a couple of minutes. We'll be back after the break. Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. My name is Frederik. I'm the owner of Insight Treatment Programs here in Santa Clarita. And today in the studio, I got Jose Rios, sorry.
No worries.
Jose, that's the second time today. But I got Jose here in the studio because he knows a lot about ABA, and he works with kids and teens and young adults who are on the spectrum, and families, and supporting them in adjusting some of the behaviors that are coming up. So he's sort of an expert in that field, and I felt it was important for us today to have a conversation about, how to deal with some of these challenges when they come up in a family. So obviously at Insight, we're not specialized in ABA, we're not specialized in treating kids who are on the spectrum or who are autistic, but we sometimes do get kids that comes in who are high functioning and who are showing some of these behavioral issues that we either need to address or have somebody from the outside come in and address for us. So so we were talking a little bit about, we got to a point where I wanted to talk a little bit about the ABA philosophies and the foundation. So sort of what would be obviously the difference between that and maybe sort of the more traditional mental health philosophy. I know we both are saying, in both worlds, we're saying, look, there is no such thing as a bad kid. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Their behavior is always a sort of a result of some of the emotional pain or some of the diagnosis or the challenges that they're facing in their lives, right?
Yeah.
They're not doing this to be stubborn or to be, so, but tell us a little bit about what do you feel is sort of the big differences between how a therapist would approach it and how somebody like yourself with an ABA background and modality would approach things.
Right. Yeah. That's I like that segue because it allows me to talk a little bit about of another aspect of what I love about ABA, and that is we'll have three different little aspects. The first one is that behavior is the product of our environment. Really, this kind of strays away from some of the psychological theories, right? That perhaps may say that emotion is the driver of behavior, or thinking is the driver of behavior, and within behavior analysis, it's the environment, and that's an important distinction because if we think that the environment is the cause of behavior, then we find the solution in the environment, which is our main treatment, the way that we lens or we view the client. So that's the first part. The second part is that ABA is a skills-based treatment, and that's important to notate because it kind of seems obvious, right? We're from a behavioral perspective, so you have to teach skills, but these skills really allow the client to become independent of the therapist or the therapist relationship. It allows the client to leave that relationship and thrive on their own. In my personal opinion, therapy shouldn't be forever.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
absolutely agree.
Yeah, and then the final aspect of ABA that I love is the view of behavior. Right, behavior itself is a form of communication. Behavior itself is functional. There is a purpose to it. That is my absolute favorite view, and that's important in this regard because once we understand the driver behind the behavior or what a person is trying to communicate through their behavior, we can intervene. We can find the correct intervention for that behavior. Yeah.
Like it. No, that's right. I was saying, could you sort of describe to the audience out there, so when you say that you need to find solutions in the environment because the behavior is a product of the environment, can you just, what do you mean there? What are you thinking of there?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things with that, and number one is that sometimes there's labels we may subscribe, right, to either be it our clients or be it children. For example, in the instance of children who may have historically have had behavioral challenges in the school, they may get labeled as someone who is, for example, difficult, or someone who is maybe lazy if they're not doing their work. But if we view it from a behavioral perspective or from an environmental perspective, we can ask questions like, what about the environment is causing this behavior? Is it because, for example, the assignment may be too difficult? Does this kid have too easy even? Yeah. Does this kid have the necessary skills to even do that activity, right? And when he engages in challenging behavior, is he trying to communicate that he can't do it?
Yeah, that's a good point too. I really like your perspective of saying, hey, look, remember, parents out there, remember that behavior is an expression.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's not verbal, but it's an expression of something.
Yes.
It's not necessarily, how should I say, it's just, it's complicated, right? But it is really expression of something, and your job, I assume, is to sort of try and translate that behavior into something that parents can understand and can see, so that's what we're trying to express here.
Yeah, so it's so funny because this conversation reminds me of a client that I had, and to this day I get both hopeful with this client but also terror with this client because, and let me tell you why. So when I first got this client, he was non-vocal. He was not talking. No other skills whatsoever. He just the iPad, right? A lot of our kids with the electronics.
Yep.
But one of the behaviors that he exhibited was a bizarre behavior where he would get up from where he was. He would walk in the middle of the living room, point to a random place in his vicinity. He would just start mouthing sounds, which is bizarre, right? And so this behavior rightly so concerned parent, and parent would always have a huge reaction to this behavior, by the way. So what we found was that with this particular behavior, the kid didn't really have any play skills. He didn't really have any sort of like leisure skills. So he wasn't able to fill his time like other kids would with toys around their environment. And so he would engage in this behavior to, one, do that, but to also kind of recruit some of the attention from parent, because parent overreacted to this behavior. Mm-hmm. And so and sure enough, as soon as we started teaching those play skills, as soon as we started teaching those leisure skills, that behavior went down drastically. It got eliminated, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that kind of shows this what we're talking about, right? This perspective. But it also terrifies me, because what if another professional would have gotten him, right? Mm-hmm. This is what sometimes may be called "quote unquote" psychosis or a psychotic episode, right? Or
good point.
Yes, it could have been interpreted as that. Good and point. So, like, what would the intervention be then, right? Medication. Yeah. Not to knock on you fellow psychiatrists, but but yeah, there's a time, and there's definitely a time and place for like that psycho medication, but for this particular instance, that wasn't it.
No,
right?
No. Would you, now that we talk about this, but
mm-hmm.
my opinion would often be that
mm-hmm.
you would need sort of both worlds to come in often.
Mm-hmm.
So often a teen like that could be working with an ABA specialist,
mm-hmm.
but also at the same time see a therapist and
Absolutely.
work on some of the more emotional things that is
Absolutely.
going on. And obviously kids that are on the spectrum,
mm-hmm.
I think from my perspective, even when they're very high functioning,
mm-hmm.
they often are living a life where they feel that they're different, right? And they feel that they don't fit in. And
Absolutely.
They're struggling to understand what's going on in their emotional world, and they
mm-hmm.
grow up with, sometimes with low self-esteem, or some of the teens that we have had in our program who have been diagnosed with autism usually wants to be part of the community, right? At Insight, we're very big on creating
mm-hmm.
community for the teens,
mm-hmm.
so they love that piece of it, and they want to be part. But then, obviously, at some point, maybe they show some things that are some behaviors that are different from the other kids, and now they're struggling to try and feel that they fit in. Yeah,
absolutely.
But my point is, do you think that it's important to have both worlds attached, meaning that that a teen should maybe see a therapist and at the same time see an ABA specialist?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think there is room for both, but I think that I do actually think that there are clients who actually would benefit more from traditional psychotherapy than ABA. I would also say that my preference would be that if they do see a psychologist, it'll be like an ACT or DBT based psychologist.
Yes.
Because within those disciplines, our frameworks align really well. So ACT based treatment or DBT based treatment are very skills based.
Yeah, correct.
And so I think that they definitely would benefit a lot from those particular types of therapy. There's also within, there's also I don't even know if I want to touch upon this, but a big controversy regarding like what you mentioned about those not only social skills, but like the acceptance of like quote unquote bizarre behavior, mm-hmm. right? We're hearing a lot from autistics that certain behavior like stimming or like flapping hands, that behavior is very soothing to them, or it's a self-regulatory behavior, mm-hmm. right? And so I'm always careful when addressing those behaviors, and so there's also the importance of like fitting in, right? but we can also teach the client to choose their friends. Choose friends that don't mind the stimming.
Yep.
Versus, right? So they don't have to necessarily fit in. They can find those individuals that will accept them for their quirks.
Of course. So what you're saying is sort of adjust the environment back to that
Exactly.
idea, right? Let's adjust the environment and allow for that to help out. But I've always found it so interesting, right? How we in society often feel, and for many years have felt, that it's the society that needs to change. Sorry, say it in a different way. It's the person, it's the autistic person who needs to change and fit into the society, rather than turning it the other way around and saying, "Hey, look, that's not how it should be." It's us as a society who needs to adjust to the idea that some people want to flap their hands, some people don't want to look you in your eyes.
Exactly.
Don't want to. That's the wrong word. But the idea that we should accept, hey, look. In this specific case, we shouldn't expect them to look you in your eye or have eye contact when they're talking or shake hands when you meet or give a big hug or some of these things that we in society feels, hey, that's normal. We should all do that, right?
Absolutely.
So that we as a society that we need to understand better and adjust better, right? I think that's a very important thing. Let me ask you, Jose, what else, what would you sort of say to parents out there? What would be your big message, if you have any? Sort of say, this is something that you always advise parents on. This is sort of the things that usually parents are struggling with.
Right.
What would you bring up?
Well, I would actually advise parents to listen. Listen more.
To you or to the child?
No, to their child. To their child. Yes.
Yep.
To listen more to their children, because so the thing is that behaviors, again, they're a form of communication, right? So if they are a form of communication, then we can I can have parents take it as so. So for example, I can best illustrate my point with an example, right? Let's say video games. Neurotypical kid playing video games. Parent comes in and says, "Dinner's ready. Let's go." Turns off the video game. Big behavior, right?
Yep.
Right. I mean, rightly so. Perhaps the kid's gotten to a level that's he's almost finished with the game. Those are typical examples of parents where perhaps the kid might have said, "I need more time." That simple phrase, "I need more time," and that simple action of parent listening to that and letting them be for a little bit more, could have prevented all that big challenging behavior.
Makes sense.
But now that that's taken away from them, then the behavior, occurs.
Yeah.
So that's just an example. A lot of the times, the teens already have those skills, so they already have the communication. It's just the parents need to sometimes need to do a better job at listening.
Yeah, I mean, that's not, I think we are all here in our field, right? But there's always a lot of parent education going on, and I think it is very important to help and guide parents to understand when to really listen.
Yes.
Because, sometimes these cues or these signals or these messages from the teens don't come at a time where you as a parent necessarily has the full potential of listening, right? It comes at times where you are stressed, or it comes at times where you're tired, and you don't necessarily pay attention to it right there in the moment. I always use the example of when we drive home you pick up your teen in school and you drive home, and on your way home, that's when you really want to talk about how was your day, what's going on.
Yeah.
You have the energy, and the teen is just tired after a day at school and all the stressors that comes with that, so they don't want to talk at that time, right?
Yeah.
But then at night, at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, when you want that last little hour for you, and that's when the teen sometimes will come up to you and start talking to you about something.
Yeah,
and you
that's
don't
common
have
too.
the energy at that time to take it in, right? You just want to go to bed or watch your series and get a little bit of peace for yourself. So it's really about timing. It's really about understanding when to.
I agree with that.
100%.
100%.
100%. Do you feel parents often in your field, when it comes to having children that are on the spectrum of some sort, do you feel parents in general are very well educated on the diagnosis and on sort of what autism is, or being on the spectrum, what that is? Or do you feel that usually there's a lot of education that needs to be done?
It really does depend. It really does depend on the family. It depends on the parents too. Sometimes there may be parents who may still be in denial.
Yeah.
They may still believe that it's just a phase that the child is going through. But my job as a behavior analyst is not really to confirm or deny that. My job really is to to build skills, address the behavioral challenges, and then continue to monitor that progress, really.
I think this whole skill building piece is so important.
Absolutely.
We've touched on it a little bit, but could you give us some examples of, how would that typically, or how could that look like? What are some of the interesting cases you've been doing where you have really helped the teens with some skill building pieces that you've
so remember one of the aspects being that behavior is a form of communication. So, let's pretend little Jose is playing in the he's playing in the playground, right? And little Susie comes over. Little Jose is playing with a toy. Little Susie grabs the toy from Jose. Jose smacks Susie and gets the toy, and Susie gives him the toy back. Or Susie drops a toy and Jose gets the toy back. Right? So let's say now Mark comes here, grabs the toy. Jose hits Mark. Mark drops the toy. Jose grabs the toy and gets the toy back. What do you think Jose is communicating by hitting Susie and Mark?
I mean, personally, I think he wants the toy. He wants to play with the toy. Don't take my toy, or I would like to have the toy.
Yeah, right?
That's all.
Right?
Yeah.
He wants his toy back. So instead of hitting, why don't we just have Jose, when Susie grabs a toy or Mark grabs a toy, hey, why don't you ask for a toy back? Give me the toy back, or give it back. Right? That is such a simplified example. But yes, essentially we replace the behavior. We replace the behavior and we ensure that the kid or the child is getting their needs met immediately, especially when we're starting to build up on that new behavior. Right? So if the kid aggresses because he wants access to a toy, we have him request a toy instead.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm sure there's lots of different things you can teach the teens in that moment, right?
Absolutely.
But also probably teaching the parents in that moment on not to give in to some of these things.
Yes.
Or to give in to some, whatever it might be, but really to sort of guide the parents on, okay, this is a behavior, this is how you need to hold your boundaries, this is what you need to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would imagine that's part of the conversations as well.
That is part of the conversations, and thank you for bringing that up, because yes, there's a part of boundary setting that comes along with that intervention as well, just to add that in there.
Yeah, because it can be very uncomfortable, right?
Yes,
Sometimes.
absolutely.
And I'm sure some behaviors are building up in the family system, right? Where when the teen or when the kids are doing certain things or showing certain behaviors, parents have certain reactions right away.
Absolutely.
And you need to go in there and sort of break that up a little bit.
Disrupt the system.
Yeah, disrupt the system, exactly, and educate, right? Good. I think we're going into a little break here again. You're listening to KHTS 98.1 FM, and this is the Insight Teen Hour every Monday between 2 and 3 p.m. So be back in a few minutes. Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. So today, Jose and I here, we are talking about ABA and how teens with, or kids with who is on the spectrum or who has been diagnosed with autism, how ABA can be very effective in helping them sort of get through some of the challenges that they're facing, and how ABA can help families or parents as well and guide them to deal with the behaviors that the teens are showing. So we were just here on the break, Jose, you and I were talking about, what are some of the things that you typically see, some of the other skills that you're often helping the kids build out. And if you could give us some examples of, how that looks like, things you think people will really relate to.
Absolutely. So one of the common behaviors that a child or a teen who is on, the lower functioning side of the spectrum, they have a hard time communicating. So what they often would do at times is they will grab the caregiver by their hand, take them to the fridge, for example, if the kid's hungry, and they would either point to a preferred item, not point to a preferred item, but wait there and have the parent guess what they want. So those are really common situations that happen within these families when the child's trying to communicate basically that they're hungry. So when these instances occur, that is just a long string of behaviors, right? You can imagine that takes away so much that takes so much effort from the kid. So being able to teach them how to communicate via one of the common modalities is vocal speech, right? If, for example, the parent knows that the kid's favorite food is peanut butter, as an instance, even having the kid utter the P in peanut butter and immediately having that peanut butter ready and giving it to them can work wonders in terms of like reinforcing the utterance of P as a behavior. So in the future, we will see the kid utter P more frequently because that results in him getting the peanut butter, right? Later on, when the kid's reliably saying P, we can add the extra layer of string of words, and then only give him the peanut butter when he uses the longer version of peanut butter. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
And we progress like that systematically. That's just a common example of how we build that like request repertoire in a kid.
On the language piece.
On the language piece specifically, yes. And even with the language, there's a lot of modalities. Sign language is also taught in replacement of vocal speech if the kid does not have that. If many instances have been tried where vocal speech is just not coming out and the kid has motor skills, then we would use sign language as a modality. Or a picture exchange system we would also use as well. All of that to teach that communication is very important. It's a very important piece in these children's lives.
I'm just a little bit off the bat here, but I was just thinking, how early do you actually go in and test and diagnose for autism? Like, how young are the kids sometimes when that's happening?
Oh, Frederik, I'm not quite sure, Frederik.
Okay.
That's not, because a lot of that piece of diagnosis, it would be a psychologist.
Yeah, of course. Goes in and does the actual testing.
Yeah. But we do get them as early as 2, from my experience.
Okay. Got it. Let me see. What else haven't we covered yet, Jose? What about things like again, we here at Insight, we typically are dealing with, if we have kids in the program that are on the spectrum autistic, they are usually, as I said, very high functioning. And one of the things we always sort of have to talk to parents about is how the kids on the spectrum are often very sort of black and white and can be considered from many parents like stubborn. Right? That's a usual thing we hear.
Yeah.
Or they're so set in their ways. They don't want to change. And they don't. It's either black or white. And that creates issues in the family. I was just curious, is that something you see as well?
Absolutely. Okay. And I think that's a reflection of just, parents may be afraid of challenging those big behaviors, and that can be just a reflection of their avoidance.
Makes sense.
Which it makes sense given some of these intensities are really high. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but Jose, time is flying.
Okay.
And we're going to be done with the show in a few minutes here, or less than 2 minutes. Jose, if somebody out there wants to talk to you, if somebody wants to reach out to you and have additional questions, whether it's a therapist who has a client maybe that they want to get some support from ABA, or whether it's parents, how can they get hold of you?
Yeah, you can email me. Email me is jrios, JRIOS, at La Raíz Bisol, LARAIZBSOL.com. Or you can call me 747-221-9794.
Great. You have a website too. Do you remember what that is?
Yes, I have a website. I believe it's laraizbehavioral.com.
Good. Perfect.
If you don't find me, you can just Google search me. I'm there.
Perfect. Awesome. Just don't hesitate to reach out to Jose. He's very friendly, and he loves to give some advice. So, but thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. It's good to have somebody in here with a different perspective than what we have, and with a skill set that we don't have. So, very much appreciated. And tune back in next Monday between 2 and 3 p.m. That will be the Insight Teen Hour, and we will be discussing things related to teen mental health.